Today I'm going to talk about why you shouldn't support ADK Drift, the shady people behind its inception, and the liabilities you're getting yourself involved in by attending these events. It is going to be a long story covering my time involved at the track and how Josiah Abadesa and Jake Hinson deleted the opportunities we were building for the community through the means of immaturity, shady business, and greed. First, we have to ask ourselves, what or who is ADK Drift? They appear as a group of welcoming friends who are open to new drifters coming to the upstate New York track Adirondack Motorsports Park, or formerly known as Adirondack International Speedway, which I will cover later, and operate as if they were a business hosting these events. Well, right off the rip, a quick Google search shows that they are not a registered business. Let's backtrack a little and I'll introduce myself. My name is Tyler Seeley, and some of you might know me from making videos on this Turbo BRZ, or if you've been here for a while, from my old Turbo MR2. A few years ago I started a business, RTS Drift, that was a real business and filed taxes, which I ultimately ended up dissolving, and I have the paperwork right here to prove it. We were a drift event organization that, through attending events all over the East Coast, tried to eliminate issues that we saw with other events. Whether that was a hard to find schedule, no schedule, or you were struggling to find tech inspections that were buried deep in the menus of a website that hadn't been updated since 2010, or you just found it hard to register as a driver, RTS was trying to make that easy for everyone. From the newbie off the street to the seasoned pro practicing for their next event, we tried to make everything as easy as possible. To do this, I had to find a venue and some help. Finding a venue was next to impossible, considering that most tracks don't want the rubber from the tires staining their asphalt, and that's understandable. Finding help for the business and legality side of things was going to be just as much of a problem. I learned quickly in this space that this stuff was competitive. Even while asking guys who have been hosting events for years, even just for a little sprinkle of advice, and informing them that I was going to be doing things on the weekends that they weren't hosting events, just weren't very receptive to the idea. Although we were anywhere from 2 to 8 hours away from these guys, it seemed like they viewed us as a threat, or as a group of friends who may poach from what they've been building. This led us to being even more hungry to create a successful event that they would still be welcome to if they chose to attend. After many weeks of scouting, I landed on a track, the aforementioned facility known as Adirondack International Speedway, or Adirondack Motorsports Park. I don't really know what they go as. If you look at the International Speedway page, it's dead. It was last updated nearly 4 years ago, discussing some sort of drama around court mandates, foreclosures, and how the owner, Paul, and I don't want to use his last name, had been ordered an eviction from the property. Apparently, he refuses to leave and has resorted to selling things on Craigslist. Allegedly. FYI, he is a little bit of an older gentleman, not that that matters, and I'm sure you knew this by the allegations that he was posting things for sale on Craigslist. I mean, I'm starting to kind of feel like an unk for still using Marketplace and not having a whatnot stream, but that's whatever. Now, if you jump over to the Motorsports Park Facebook page, business is booming. Mudding events, shitbox races, mega trucks, and of course, drifting. This is where we see them advertising for Josiah's business, or not business, or the track's business, I don't know what it is, but it says, this Saturday, September 20th, ADK Drift returns to our International Speedway track for some tire shredding fun. But wait a minute, I thought it was Motorsports Park. I thought this had nothing to do with the International Speedway business, which is another concerning point. If you think that even at this point, where I'm just starting out, things are getting wild, you just wait. So back in 2022, when I originally reached out to host events at the Adirondack International Speedway, or Motorsports Park, or for the rest of the video we're just going to call it the track, I knew a little bit of the drama, but not to the extent that I see now doing research for this video. I was aware there was some ongoing legal issues, nothing that the owner Paul said would be of any issue to us. So we hit the ground running. We designed a super easy to use website, a seamless checkout, and a site map to ensure that everyone knew where to go upon arrival. Upon that arrival, they would be greeted at the front gate by one of our amazing volunteers who verified their purchase, gave them and their guests wristband, and directed them to parking, which would also double as a tech location. We determined that this was much better than having to wait in line for something like a tech barn, especially in July with the 90% New York humidity. Nobody wants to wait an hour long inside of their car. Instead, show up, unload your car, get in your pit, and when you're ready, you flag down one of our volunteers who would come and tech your car and give you an approved sticker. Like I said, all these people who helped out at each event, they were volunteers. None of us made a dime off these events. That was never the goal, that was never our intention. Our main focus was on developing improvements to drift events and curate a welcoming environment for all skill levels and from all backgrounds. Hell, we even had some Canadians who became regulars, and some of their first time in the States was for our event, and that's pretty amazing. We ran these events this way for about a year and a half. We would do an event once a month, every month, the weather was permitting. This quickly became an issue and where most of our issues moving forward started. It was just too much. Too many events, too often, made them feel not as special. Nobody felt like if they missed one of our events, it was a big deal. I'll just catch the next one. Was mentioned to us so many times, I almost wanted to put it on a shirt. Joking aside, we were still very thankful. Never once did we act like if you didn't show up to f*** off. Every single person, every event who came through, and every guest they brought were informed of how thankful we were for their attendance. We remember everyone and everything about their cars and made it a priority to remember things that they were working on and ask them about it on their next visit. I feel like this made everyone feel like they were truly cared about, and that's because they were. Like I said not too long ago, too many events too often was crushing us. That, and something that was failed to be mentioned to us previously, was that we were about to be shut down from doing overnight events. Little did we know that the mudding events were so big, they were the main attention of the county, specifically the Department of Health. And I guess that's not too much of a surprise, knowing that with a town of only 25,000 people, that they would be interested in everything that the track's doing. I mean, they basically have the track and a McDonald's. So anyway, the Department of Health was cracking down on no camping at the track, which I wasn't originally tracking was ever even an issue unless we reached over a certain attendance amount, and that was wrong. So to not burn any bridges and appease the townfolk and the powers that governed us, I made the executive decision to drop the number of events. I figured that with so many people missing events for other big names coming into the town the same weekend, that doing one big event a year would help us have the best turnout and fund what we needed in order to get everything up to code and permitted. We needed around $65,000 in order to put it on grid running power from the road, which was unlikely, or $10,000 was the going rate for a Tesla Powerwall back then, and that would have the capabilities to power the water filtration system and permits back for camping. Now, if you think all this stuff from earlier was juicy, strap in. I told our guests that we were limiting events, and as expected, they were upset. I would get messages asking what's going on. I tried to explain the situation in further detail, and now you have to understand when I would make a public post, I would be very careful to not use language that would scare somebody off, but also in a way that would try to convey that there was a reason why we were doing what we were doing. This is where Josiah and his friend Jake Hansen come in. There are others involved as well, like Daniel Nathan and Mike Scagno, but for now, we're just going to focus on Josiah and Jake. These guys used to come to our events. From some of our earliest events, they were there. They came off as friendly, cool, genuine dudes that just wanted to see us succeed. They would help get firewood and stay late when everyone left to help me clean up the track. They were awesome dudes, so I thought. I started to get a little concerned when I mentioned the cutback in events, which led to Josiah asking probing questions about what deal he had to use in order to use the track. They weren't blunt, how did you do it and can we do it questions, but rather, I'm gonna go behind your back and do it regardless type questions. Now, I don't want to be a hypocrite to what I said earlier about how when I reached out to people, they were cold or viewed me as competition. They shouldn't have. I was doing things on separate days, hundreds of miles away from them. But these guys were attempting to do something at the same track, jeopardizing everything that we were building and trying to do in order to get it up to code and legal. So one morning, I wake up and find somebody sent me something that said, "What the hell is this?" And it's a new drifting Facebook group for a group called ADK Drift. Looking at it for 2 seconds showed us as Josiah who started another event at the track. Now, I wouldn't have had a problem with it if he would have reached out originally. I could have taken him on as a member and helped our volunteers and teach him the ropes of running a legit legal business, and in turn, he could have eventually became a partner. Who knows? But that didn't happen. I reached out to him, and mind you, I have receipts, I'll keep you in the loop with most of it, but don't want to bore you with the petty back and forth. But anyway, I say, damn bro, I wish you would have told me and tried to work with me on events. To which he replies, my bad dude, it's not anything you did. I didn't work with anybody on this. I just wanted to streamline it and get it done. That's all that mattered was drifting. I don't want to make a buck or anything, just keep it alive. Okay, so you only care about drifting. What about the legalities or the safety of the guests who attend? That's a weird way to keep something alive. Clearly, you only care about what you want, like a child who's fighting for a toy. You operate on how things make you feel and not an entire community as a whole. If you truly cared about the drifting community and wanted to keep something alive, maybe you would have reached out and asked why I was doing what I was doing instead of operating on the greed of just wanting to drift, and that's exactly what I told him. I said, that's exactly what I was trying to do, but make everything beyond legit and make sure that the county and anyone who could shut it down couldn't. Now this is where I start showing my support while all this is still fresh in my head. Anyone else would instantly jump to 1,000, cuss each other out, and make it more than it is. Me, I tried to play the role of the concerned big brother at first. I asked him, did you register this as a business? What are you doing for insurance? I'm about to have to shut down just for the liability, as in the liability of him hosting and hoping that things go smooth. If people in the town hear that somebody gets hurt drifting at the track, they're not going to separate the two events. If somebody gets hurt, somebody gets hurt. I proceed to tell him that I'm just hurt finding out from other participants that this is how it's happening. He replies with, shit man, I figured you'd be upset. He continues on apologizing and finishes with, I worked for months to make this happen for everybody. No sir, we worked for over a year to build this and now you're hoping to ride off our coattails of what we're building. Even through this exchange and how upset I am, I'm still mentioning that I'm coming out to support, and I tell him I'll gladly come out and support, I just wish you would have kept me in the loop. And that's exactly what I did, but before that, I wanted to make sure he was successful. I told him about protecting himself and at least forming an LLC at a minimum. Based off the shady stuff I talked about at the beginning of this, that might not be a bad idea. I mentioned making sure to have an air compressor because the one that was at the track for the tire machine was my personal one. I told him about things that you don't learn about until they happen, like having things on standby for those with allergies. We had to keep extra wasp repellent and whatnot on standby since they like to mingle in the porta potties and bee allergies are very common. I told him all of this to be successful. If I wanted him to fail, I would have responded, yeah man, everything's up at the track, it's ready to go have fun. But I didn't. So fast forward to the event, I show up around 10 in the morning. I'm not sure what gate to go to, I don't know if they're still running everything the same way that I was. There was nothing mentioned about it. I messaged him and asked him if it was the same gate or the main gate, and there was no response. No worries, I can find out where to go. I get up there and I see an empty table. I pull up to it, and after about 5 minutes, somebody comes running up. He sees myself and my girlfriend, and he says, $40 please. I said online it said it was only $10 a person to spectate. He says, oh, hold on a minute, let me check. Awkwardly, he started texting somebody, and eventually he replies, oh yeah, that's fine. Okay, so how are you going to sit here operating the front gate and not even knowing the price of your own event that you're helping build? Not a big deal, I'll continue on. I drive through and make my way to the spectating area. I see a bunch of mini bikes on track, which I think is a little weird. I thought this was a drift event. Again, it's no biggie. I'm sure that there's an explanation. Eventually, after hanging out for a bit, Josiah finds me and makes his way over. He looks at me like a guilty dog who just got caught pissing inside, and he says, hey man, I'm really sorry again about everything that happened. I tell him, hey man, it's water under the bridge. Like I said, I told you I'd come out and still support, which is what I'm doing. He goes, I really appreciate you, man. Yeah, Paul accidentally double booked the track, so we have to go in between the mini bike races. I look over, and now there's a random dog running in front of all these mini bikes. Big yikes. Seems like a liability to me. But I ignore it and encourage him that it will all work out. Now, because there are regulars at this track, they were attending our events, of course they're going to be at this one as well. It's no surprise. But one participant comes up to me and says, hey, when you were hosting an event, didn't you have the barrels one exit later? I said, yeah, usually. He goes, do you think you should tell him about that? Now, I know doing this could be a problem. I didn't want Buddy thinking that I was showing up to nitpick his event, and that was not what I was trying to do. I even told this guest that. I said, hey man, this is his thing. If you want to tell him, that's fine, but I don't want him thinking that I'm here to shit on every little thing that he's doing. I could say this to him blue in the face, everybody. I was trying for it to be successful and drama-free as much as I could. About 20 minutes go by, and now someone makes it out to the track. They go to initiate on the first turn, and if you know this track, it is pretty fast. He entered the turn at around 60 miles an hour, and a dog runs out on the track for a second time. That's a serious issue. They got lucky the first time with it happening during the mini bikes, now they got extra lucky with this person in the car narrowly avoiding the dog. After that, I did speak up to him offline. I didn't blast him in front of his friends or use it as an opportunity to embarrass him, but rather encourage him more. Mind you, in our earlier conversation online, I mentioned what he was going to do for insurance. He said he didn't need it and that it was going to be all on the track's insurance. Based off what I told you earlier, do you believe that to be the case? No business, no insurance, just full send? Although he did say he was going to be more strict because of all of that, another guest mentioned to me how he heard it's basically lawless out there. And from what I saw, it was. Back to the present time, the event's over, I go my way, he goes his. 4 days later, I see an event flyer with my truck in the background. That's weird because we took my girlfriend's car out there. Wait a minute, I know what's going on. He took a picture from one of our events and used it to make a flyer for his. That's weird. Very weird. Of course, I ask him about this, to which he replies very bothered, and mind you, after this first event, I was supposed to go take a job overseas, which got delayed, and I'm still home. He doesn't know that. That's when he takes the opportunity to let his true character show. So I tell him, hey man, it's really not cool to use photos from another event's page. It's kind of like a no-go in the drift world. If you've been in the scene for a little bit, you know how media is with drift events. I continue and say, I know you snagged it from our page because it was the first picture after the videos that were posted. And like I said, he goes, dude, does it really matter? It's about who comes. I can't agree with that. It is about who comes, but taking pictures from somebody else's event to publish it as your own is definitely a shady way to get them there. I told him that I wasn't giving him an attitude, I was just telling him that it was kind of messed up. Now this is where he switches. Josiah says, while thinking that I'm overseas now, it's kind of messed up you care so much, like come on dude. So the same kid who looked like a guilty dog apologizing to me, who I helped ensure had all the tools and resources available to him to run a successful event, has now switched up, giving the same guy an insane attitude. I let him know this. I said, I didn't shit on your event publicly when I could have. I said there was dogs running on the track, staff not knowing prices, no fire safety. You're being serious right now. So after sitting by and watching somebody take what we worked so long and basically almost run it into the ground after the first event, I spoke up. Make a public post informing people not to attend for all the reasons I mentioned through this tangent. He replies telling me again how terrible of a person I am. Once again, the guy who made sure you had everything in place to succeed and you still failed and nobody else is a terrible person? Make it make sense, people. I could have ended it there and I was ready to, and this is until Jake steps up. Jake jumps in my DMs trying to be friendly at first. This will quickly change after some slanders thrown back and forth, and I do stoop to that level and say some hurtful stuff back, and I'm not going to act like I didn't. So anyway, he starts asking me to stop being a baby and arguing with Josiah. I told him how he could have been much more mature after I sat there and supported what they did. This goes back and forth for a little while until Jake says, for me, Dan, and Mike, there is no beef. To which I reply, likewise man, I like y'all's group, which is why I supported you guys. I have no bad blood with any of you guys, but Josiah was 100% over the line with his attitude. Which he was. I was cool, I supported, he thought I left, he switched up. Now, just because I say we're cool doesn't mean I'm gonna let people come out to an event that I think is dangerous. Not only that, I think is dangerous, but that I know is dangerous. So I start letting the community know. When people are asking for recommendations, I name a few that I've been to that I can speak from experience on and the ones to avoid, and in this case, avoid ADK. Jake sees that, I tell somebody not to go there because it's not worth it, and then I DM them why. Once again, still being the bigger man and not airing out any more dirty laundry in random groups. When they ask, I tell them, not the world. I already did it that way in my first post by not attending, and now I'm doing it again with this video. Anyway, Jake jumps in my DMs, Tyler, what's up, man? Please cut this gay shit out. I said it's exactly what I said it was. Now, Jake doesn't like me telling people to avoid danger, but loves it so much he reminds me, do your gay military shit and get on with your gay life. I don't know, Jake, you might be projecting here. Being awfully homophobic with how much you allegedly hate gay stuff is generally a trait people who tend to be in the closet the most. Basic psychology. Jake sends this message, then blocks me, then unblocks me. I let him know that he's a bitch for this and how it's little man energy. Like I said, I stoop to this level. Jake becomes a big man here and drops the line, "I'm not a Twitter finger faggot like you." Again, there's that homophobic rhetoric. Weird pattern for you, Jake. I tell him to not be a pussy his whole life. Jake, right on theme, says, "Suck my balls," followed by "Suck my gooch." Once again, for someone who apparently is against so much gay stuff, you are requesting quite a lot of it. I tell him I'll meet him at the track. I mean, I'm a pussy, right? So if you're gonna call somebody a pussy and then they threaten to show up to you face to face and see if you have that same energy and you back down, that in fact makes you a pussy, which is exactly what happens. When I mention showing up, now the gooch-licking hairy ball man backs into the corner saying how I'll be arrested for assault. You're all very hypocritical of this guy. He stays amusing, continuing comments like, "You're mad gay and it's not Fast and Furious, it's reality, you dumbass." I'm just kidding. Do you really think he said dumbass? He said dumb fag. And it continues back and forth like this. We're approaching the end here, but eventually this leads to him saying something interesting, and that's, "You're a fucking narcissist." Which I thought was so out of left field at first, until way later in the conversation when how he mentions I should eat his dick. Oh wait, that was when I tried calming him down by telling him he can catch more flies with honey. Anyway, the narcissistic thing was weird until he says, "You want to have TikTok followers." Now I'm starting to kind of piece everything together. What I gathered from my Sherlock Holmes investigation was this. And this may actually sound a little narcissistic at first, but from the outside what they saw was a muscular active duty infantryman, at the time I was a little bigger, who had a relatively nice drift car, an attractive girlfriend, and was building an event that they wished they had, and it was a byproduct of us building this event and publishing videos to help garner attention and in turn receive followers. They saw as us attempting to be influencers. Now all the hard work that we've been building events at the track, but from their perspective, they saw us as everything that they weren't. They knew they weren't capable of serving their country. They knew they couldn't commit to the gym and stay disciplined. They knew that they couldn't take my girlfriend. So the one thing that they thought would be the easiest to get were the drift events, and that's what they did. They had the mindset of, this guy has enough, what does it really matter if he loses one more thing? And that's why I always say misery loves company. Nobody wants you to do bad, but people hate when you're doing better than them. It's unfortunate, but I know that we can all relate to that one person in our lives. Something as small as getting a new vehicle and you have that one friend who's like, must be nice, but they don't know all the sacrifice and work it took to get there. They just see the final product. And like I said, that may sound narcissistic, but based off the way he was writing and being belligerent, that's why I think he was saying what he said and they did what they did. Now I wasn't going to make this video until somebody asked about the events to go to, and as I usually do, maybe once a year when I see somebody ask, I write 2 tracks to go to and 1 to avoid. Obviously you know which one to avoid and why I mentioned that. Somebody replied to my comment today and mentioned how I was just holding a grudge and not letting it go. And while this video may seem like that's the case, it's more so putting all the information and facts out there in one place to get my story 100% squared away. Because as we learn from these guys, perception isn't always reality. And if you're blind to the facts, that will get you nothing but a bad reputation in an event that is sure to fail. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.